Hi, in this episode of Think Development Out Loud, we will be having Nicola Pratt, who is a reader of international politics of the Middle East in the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Warwick. I would like to welcome Nicola, and we look forward to hearing about your work. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Muzaya, and thank you for inviting me. So I thought today I'd just talk about a project that I did quite a few years ago, but it's the basis of a book that is coming out later this year. So the book is going to be called Embodying Geopolitics, Generations of Women's Activism in Egypt, Jordan and Lebanon. And the research for that book I conducted between 2013 and 2014 in Egypt, Jordan and Lebanon. And I interviewed women activists of different generations in those countries. And altogether, I interviewed around 100 women. And so these interviews, which were sort of in the form of personal life stories, these form the basis of the material for my forthcoming book. So I'll just say something about sort of approach that I took to the research. So as I said, it was in the form of sort of life stories. And the reason I chose this method was in order to centre women's voices as a sort of situated and embodied knowledge about the international relations and politics of the Middle East. So the field of Middle East international relations and politics is still very sort of masculinist, gender, feminism, women's voices are not something that is very prevalent at all in the literature on Middle East politics. Although, of course, there is a huge literature on gender and women and feminism in the Middle East, but this tends to have been carried out by anthropologists or historians, other disciplines. So I wanted to bring a sort of post-colonial feminist perspective on Middle East politics and international relations, and I saw women activists in particular as interesting subjects to study, because they definitely in their everyday lives they are straddling the personal and the political, the personal and the public, and even sort of the national and the international. So that was sort of my reason for choosing that type of method. And then in terms of how I approached the analysis of those life stories or personal narratives, I used a narrative approach. So I was particularly influenced by other feminist, and not only feminist scholars, but also scholars who have studied, for example, the working classes or other sort of marginalized or subaltern groups. So, you know, to sort of see these narratives as potentially unheard stories about politics and international relations in the Middle East. But one of the challenges I did face, if I can jump to challenges, is the fact that well, first of all, I ended up with a huge amount of material, with around 100 interviews that lasted on average an hour. So that was a lot of material to analyse. But also another issue I faced is that it was not always clear that what I was being told were sort of unheard stories or untold stories, and I think this was because, for the most part, the women that I interviewed were middle-class women, and these are not sort of the most marginalised women. These are women who are relatively quite privileged. So actually, I came to realise that their stories are not necessarily untold stories, but rather what these women's stories represented was their sort of like them writing themselves into what are otherwise quite familiar stories of national development, in post-colonial independence, other major national events. So this was more like women writing their perspectives into those already existing stories, rather than telling stories that were previously not considered. But I think this presents really important and rich material for thinking about the gendered dimensions of international relations and politics in the specific context of the Middle East. So I think that there's a lot of excellent feminist in the field of feminist IR. There's a lot of excellent scholarship that brings gender and feminism into the study of international relations, but a lot of it is quite specific maybe to the West, North America, Europe, and I think there's been less attention given to how the geopolitics or the specific geography or location in which women are living, and the specific histories around the construction of those, for example, geographic boundaries, the history of the creation of the Middle East and the creation of the state system within the Middle East, how those particular geopolitical experiences might have particular implications for women's lives, for women's activism. So I think that this was like one of the one of the things that worked really well about adopting that sort of a methodology. Did you want to ask any further questions?
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.